My name is Isa Mercer, and I'm 35 years old. If you'd glanced at my life a year ago, you probably would have thought she's fine. She's safe. She's got it together. Modest but bright apartment with plants that only died when I forgot to open the blinds for a week. Every bill on autopay. A car that wasn't sexy but always started even in February. A retirement account I actually contributed to, even when it meant saying no to once-in-a-lifetime weekends my friends insisted we'd tell our grandkids about. I didn't land in that life by accident. I built it spreadsheet by spreadsheet, one boring, responsible decision at a time. I was the sensible one, the friend with jumper cables in the trunk and a backup charger in her bag. The emergency contact people wrote down without thinking twice. The person you sent your bank statements to when your checking account looked like a crime scene and you needed someone who wouldn't flinch at the numbers. People said it like a compliment. Sometimes it felt like a label. A neat little sticker slapped on my forehead. Reliable low maintenance will not cause trouble. For 4 years, sitting right in the center of that sensible life, there was Dylan Hart. He was 32, worked in marketing, and had that kind of charisma that made strangers overshare in grocery store lines. His laugh was loud and unembarrassed. He could make a story about buying dish soap sound like a stand-up routine. We'd been together for 4 years, living together for 2 of them. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or so I thought. We talked about marriage and kids and whether we'd end up in the suburbs with an overwatered lawn and neighbors who borrowed sugar and never returned Tupperware. Dylan joked about our future dog names. I joked about who would be the stricter parent. Somewhere on my phone there was a folder hidden 3 layers deep full of ring designs and proposal ideas, rooftops and fairy lights and string quartets and spontaneous photographers who just happened to be there. I thought I was planning for the next season of our life. Instead, I was storyboarding a movie that was never going to be filmed. It was a Tuesday evening in March when it cracked. I knew something was off the moment Dylan walked through the door. He closed it too carefully, set his keys down too gently. His shoulders were tight, his jaw working like he was chewing on words. He had that look, the we need to talk face. The one that makes your stomach drop and your hands go cold even before anyone has said anything. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there in our living room, taking it in like he was seeing it for the first time. The sagging gray couch we'd argued over, the gallery wall of frames we never finished, the pile of shoes by the door that was more his than mine. I need to talk to you," he's finally said. There it was. My heart started beating everywhere. Neck, ears, fingertips. "Okay," I said, "because what else do you say to that?" He crossed his arms over his chest, a defensive shield. I don't know who I am anymore." The line was so familiar, it took me a second to realize he was saying it to me. "I feel lost," he continued. "Like I went straight from college to work to us, and I never really got to figure myself out. It's not you. You're amazing. It's me. I just need time." There it was. The cliché. I need time to figure myself out. 4 years of shared life condensed into something you could fit on a cheap, inspirational poster. How much time, I asked. My voice sounded weirdly calm, like it belonged to someone watching the scene from the hallway. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe a few months. I think we should take a break." A break, I repeated it slowly, like if I rolled the syllables around enough, they'd make sense. "Not a breakup," he rushed to add. "Just space-time to think, to work on myself. I don't want to lose you, Isa. I can't breathe like this. Like this was a trap. Our home, our life, the future. I had been quietly planning in color-coded tabs. I could have asked questions, demanded specifics. What changed? When did you start feeling this way? Is there someone else I could have begged, bargained? Promised to give him more freedom, more spontaneity, more whatever he thought he'd misplaced. Instead, I watched him. Really watched him. The way his eyes kept sliding away from mine. The way he seemed braced for impact, like he was waiting for me to explode so he could feel justified. The strange relief that flickered across his face every time I didn't react. And I understood something cold and clear. He'd already made his decision. This conversation wasn't a question. It was a script he'd rehearsed. He was telling me which way the door was. "Okay," I said quietly. "Take all the time you need." His eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected it to be that easy. For a second, real guilt flashed in his expression. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly. "But you've already decided. I'm not going to fight you for a relationship you're halfway out of. Relief washed over his features so fast it almost made me nauseous. Relief when he was breaking my life in half. That was the moment, by the way. The exact second something in me shifted from, please don't leave, to, I am never going to beg you to stay. I didn't say that out loud, not yet. He moved out that weekend. He took his clothes, his books, his collection of craft beer glasses I secretly hated. He took the stupid lava lamp his college roommate had given him, the one I'd threatened to accidentally shatter 100 times. He left behind the echoes, the dent in the couch cushion where he always sat, the mug with a chipped handle he claimed made coffee taste better, the almost empty bottle of his cologne on the dresser, sending up ghosts every time I opened the bedroom door. The apartment felt bigger and smaller at the same time. Too much space and not enough air. I moved through it like I was walking through a museum of our life, after all the exhibits had been removed. Just outlines on the walls, where frames used to hang empty hooks, where his jackets used to live. People talk about heartbreak like it's loud, screaming, sobbing, dramatic music swelling in the background. Mine was quiet. Wake up. Go to work. Answer emails. Pretend to listen in meetings. Come home. Stand in the doorway and feel the emptiness press in like a second skin. Repeat. The first week, I kept almost making 2 cups of coffee. My hand would reach automatically for his favorite cereal at the grocery store. I'd unlock my phone to send him a meme, thumb hovering over his name before I remembered. He needs time to figure himself out. Translation. You don't get to reach for me anymore. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I didn't ask mutual friends how he was doing. If he needed time, he could have all of it. The first month was the worst. Nights were the longest. That was when the questions got loud. When did he start feeling like this? How much of the last year was real? Why hadn't I seen it? Had I been too focused on being responsible, being stable, being the sensible one to notice we'd already started drifting apart? But even in the fog, little things stuck out like pins in a map. The way he'd started working late more often in the months before the break. How he suddenly cared about clothes he used to mock as trying too hard. The way he'd gone from sharing future plans with me to shrugging and saying, I don't know. We'll see. At the time, I'd told myself it was stress. A rough quarter at work, maybe some quiet anxiety about turning 33. In hindsight, it looked a lot like someone trying to pry open a locked door from the inside. By month 2, something inside me started to loosen. It wasn't dramatic. There was no Rocky-style training montage, just small choices. Saying yes when a friend invited me to a climbing gym Dylan always called dangerous and stupid. Filling my Saturday mornings with chalk and harnesses instead of laundry and meal prep. Taking a different way home from work. Sitting in a cafe alone with a book instead of racing home to make dinner by 6 o'clock. Breathing a little deeper. People around me noticed before I did. You seem lighter, one of my coworkers said as we waited for the elevator. Did you get a promotion or something? Not yet, I replied, half joking, but something definitely got restructured. On my phone, buried under layers of apps, that secret folder of ring designs and proposal ideas still existed. But I found myself opening it less and less. Eventually, I moved it to the trash and didn't hit undo. I'd meant it back in that living room when I told Dylan he could take all the time he needed. What I didn't realize then was how literally I was going to interpret my own words. I wasn't pressing pause. I was hitting play just without him. And somewhere out there, as he figured himself out, my own life was quietly, steadily starting to change shape into something he'd never planned for, and that he would not recognize when he finally decided to look back. By month 3, the silence between Dylan and me had settled into the shape of a fact. He hadn't called. I hadn't either. His name still lived in my phone, but further down, now below coworkers and dentist reminders and food delivery apps. Every time my screen lit up, there was a split second where my brain whispered, what if it's him? And then it never was. Life kept moving anyway. I threw myself into work at first because spreadsheets made more sense than feelings. Numbers listened when you told them where to go. They didn't stand in your living room and say they needed time to figure themselves out. My boss started asking me to sit in on bigger meetings. I stayed late, but this time it was for me, not to coordinate schedules with someone waiting at home. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I went to the climbing gym. The first time I walked in, I almost turned around. The place smelled like chalk and rubber and effort. People half my age were hanging upside down on bright plastic holds, laughing, falsing, getting back up. I felt ridiculous in my rented shoes and harness. Dylan had always rolled his eyes when I'd mentioned wanting to try it. Why would you pay to almost fall to your death, he joked, when gravity is already free. But gripping the wall, feeling my legs shake, as I reached for the next hold, there was a strange, clean quiet in my head. No what-ifs, no replaying conversations, just my fingers, my breath, and the next small decision. At the top of my first beginner route, I looked down and realized my fear wasn't about the height. It was about the fact that I was doing something I'd wanted for years without asking anyone's permission. When I clipped back in on the ground, the instructor grinned. "See, not so bad." I was panting, hands shaking, but I smiled back. "Not so bad." Walking to my car, I caught myself thinking, Dylan would hate this. The thought didn't hurt as much as I'd expected. A few weeks later, my friend Nate dragged me to a dinner party at his older sister's house. "Come on," he begged, texting me 3 variations of the same message. "You never go out anymore." I promise there will be carbs and people who don't talk about quarterly reports. I almost said no out of habit. Then I caught myself. My evenings were mine, now empty by default. If I wanted them to be full, I'd have to start choosing things on purpose. "Fine," I wrote back. "But if everyone there is married and wants to give me advice about getting back out there, I'm leaving." Nate replied with a string of laughing emojis and an address. The house was warm and chaotic, full of mismatched chairs, and the smell of garlic and something baking. People were perched on countertops, clustered around the table, shouting over each other in the kind of comfortable way that only happens when everyone's known each other too long. Nate's sister shoved a drink into my hand and introduced me to 3 people at once, none of whose names I caught. I was halfway through my first awkward small talk circle when someone at the far end of the room said, "You're Isa, right from the climbing gym." I turned. He was leaning against the doorway to the back porch, a bottle of beer dangling from one hand. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair that refused to lie flat, a faint scar near his left eyebrow like he'd once laughed instead of ducked. I blinked. "Have we met, sort of?" he said, pushing off the frame and walking toward me. "You were on the autoplay last week, muttering that you regretted ever trusting gravity. I was the one below you saying, 'Keep going. You've got it.'" I remembered the voice shouting encouragement when I'd frozen halfway up the wall. "Right." Heat rushed to my cheeks. "So, you heard that hard not to." He stuck out his hand. "I'm Connor, Nate's friend from college, and also apparently your unofficial hype man when you're 30 feet up." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, not lingering. His eyes were sharp, but not invasive. "Isla," I said, even though he already knew. "And in my defense, Gravity and I are still renegotiating our relationship." He laughed low and honest. "Aren't we all?" We ended up on the back porch after dinner, partly to escape the board game chaos that broke out in the living room, partly because the air inside had turned thick and loud. So Connor said, leaning against the railing, "How did Nate bribe you into coming tonight? Guilt, blackmail, promises of dessert?" "All of the above," I said. "Plus, I think he's running an experiment to prove I remember how to talk to people who aren't coworkers or my cat. You have a cat, I have a plant that thinks it's a cat. It sulks when I ignore it and only thrives on inconsistent attention." He smiled. "I used to have a ficus like that. My ex-wife got custody in the divorce." The words hung between us for a second. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, then winced. "About the divorce, not the ficus. I'm sure it's very happy where it is." He chuckled. "Don't be sorry. The ficus is thriving, last I heard. As for the marriage, also probably for the best." There was no bitterness in his tone, just a kind of weary honesty I recognized. "What about you?" he asked. "Nate said you went through a breakup recently, and then he looked guilty, like he'd said something he wasn't supposed to, so I'm guessing it's still fresh." I stared at the condensation on my glass. My boyfriend of 4 years asked for time to figure himself out 6 months ago. "Ouch," Connor said softly. "Did he leave a forwarding address for his identity when he moved out? Or—" A laugh escaped me, sharp and surprised. "No forwarding address, just a very dramatic exit and a lot of silence." "And you?" he asked. "Did you wait by the metaphorical window, or—" "I waited by the literal one for about 3 weeks," I admitted. Then I realized the blinds were open and my neighbors probably thought I was possessed, so I started going to the gym instead. He nodded slowly. "So you're in the weird in-between." "Not with him. Not exactly single in your head yet either. That obvious." He shrugged. "I am professionally familiar with the limbo. Ex-wife and I separated long before the paperwork caught up. There's this awkward phase where you're technically free, but part of your brain still thinks in we. That struck a little too close to home. With the climbing and the dinner parties, I'm trying to retrain it, I said. Teach it how to say I again without glitching. He smiled, but there was a seriousness in his eyes. For what it's worth, you seem pretty good at I already. We talked for 3 hours about nothing and everything about his divorce. My spreadsheets, the absurdity of dating apps, and the way grief shows up in the toothpaste aisle when you least expect it. He was blunt in a way that felt refreshing, not cruel. When he didn't know what to say, he just didn't fill the silence with noise. At the end of the night, as people started pulling on coats and searching for missing keys, he tapped his phone against the table. "Can I give you my number?" he asked. "No pressure, just in case you ever want someone to yell encouragement at you from the floor while you're hanging off a wall again." I hesitated for half a second, listening for the familiar echo. What would Dylan think? Nothing answered. "Sure," I said, on one condition. "Name it." "If I text you something embarrassing about almost dying on a beginner road, you're not allowed to screenshot it and send it to Nate." "No promises," he said, grinning. "But I'll try to restrain myself." We started texting the next day. Not constant, not all-consuming, just small human check-ins between meetings and gym sessions and grocery runs. A picture of his coffee mug with the caption, "Monday is a hate crime." A photo of my climbing shoes tossed in a corner. "If I die, tell the instructor I died bravely, and not crying while asking to be lowered." He asked how I was doing. I didn't lie and say fine. I said some days are heavy, some days aren't. "Today is medium." He replied, "Medium is progress." We both agreed on one thing early. Neither of us was ready for labels, for expectations, for anything that looked like the relationships that had recently exploded behind us. "I don't want to be someone's rebound," I said one night on the phone, staring at the crack in my bedroom ceiling. "I don't want to make someone audition to replace my ex," he answered. "So maybe we just won't do either of those things." "Is that allowed?" I asked. "I think we're adults," he said dryly. "We can invent the rules as we go." By month 4, we were seeing each other regularly. Not in the movie montage way with perfect dates and sweeping music. More like cooking dinner together and arguing about garlic. Watching terrible movies, we both ignored going for walks where we spent more time talking than looking at the view. I never called him my boyfriend. He never called me his girlfriend. It was something quieter but no less real. We were two people trying to move forward without pretending we'd never been hurt. The strange thing was, the more honest we were about our limbo, the less stuck I felt. The space in my life where Dylan used to live wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't fully defined either. It was in progress. A work site with the tape still up and the paint still drying. Month 5. My boss called me into his office. "For once it's not bad news," he said, gesturing toward the chair. "Sit." I sat hard, hammering anyway. Old instincts. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his monitor and rotated it so I could see. "We're opening up a position in the Seattle office, senior role. It's a step up, more responsibility, higher pay." Your name came up loudly. My first reaction was practical relocation, logistics, cost of living, what it would mean to be that far from family. My second reaction was quieter. Almost shy gray skies, mountains, water. A place I'd always wanted to live, tucked away in the corner of my mind, like those secret ring designs used to be. Dylan always complained about the Pacific Northwest whenever it came up. Too gloomy, he'd say. I'd last a week and then start chewing on light bulbs. I, on the other hand, loved the idea of misty mornings and sweaters 10 months of the year. Isa, my boss, asked, "You look like I just offered you either your dream or a root canal." "Hard to tell." I exhaled. "Can I think about it for a day?" "Of course," he said. "But if you say no, I will haunt you at your desk for the rest of your career." That night, I called my mom. I called Nate. I stared at the ceiling until 2 o'clock in the morning. Then I realized something simple. There was no we to factor into this decision anymore. No second career to weigh. No boyfriend's family to consider. It was just my life, my choice. I said yes the next day. The transfer process started immediately. Paperwork, timelines, logistics. The move date landed in late September, almost exactly 6 months after Dylan had carried his last box out of our apartment. I didn't tell him. There was no reason to. He'd asked for time and space. I'd given him both. I owed him nothing else. I gave notice on my apartment. For the last couple of weeks before my flight, I stayed at Nate's place sleeping on his lumpy but free couch, while my boxes sat stacked by the door like quiet witnesses. On a Thursday night, 3 days before my flight, I was sprawled on that couch surrounded by half-packed suitcases and open cardboard when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look. It was late and I was tired. When I did, my breath caught. Not in the dramatic world-tilting way it used to, but in a startled, "Oh, you still exist" kind of way. Dylan, his name on my screen for the first time in 6 months. The message was short. "I miss you terribly." I stared at it for a full minute, waiting for something to rise in me. Anger, hope, hurt, nostalgia. Nothing came. There was just a quiet emptiness where all those feelings used to live. Not the hollow kind, more like a room that had been cleared out and cleaned. When I finally started typing, the words came easily. "You probably won't find me where I am anymore." Dylan read my message instantly. Those 3 familiar dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I could imagine him on the other end, pacing, running a hand through his hair, rehearsing lines he wasn't sure I would let him say. 6 months ago, that image would have broken me. Now it just felt distant, like remembering a dream I'd already told someone about, and therefore couldn't slip back into. A second later, another notification lit up my screen. A photo. I tapped it open. There he was standing in front of our old building, the one I'd moved out of weeks ago. He looked the same and somehow older, shoulders tense, hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. He was holding yellow roses. My favorite, wearing the navy shirt I once said, made him look unfairly good. But the part that stopped me, the part that made me exhale slowly, was his face. He was crying. Tears strews raw, his eyes searching for something that wasn't there anymore. My phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Curiosity won. "Isa." His voice cracked on my name. "What do you mean I won't find you?" "I moved out," I said softly. 3 weeks ago." A long beat of silence followed. I could almost hear the click of some internal gear misfiring. Why I'm leaving for Seattle in 3 days. That did it. What? No. No, you can't just, Isla. You can't just leave. You left first, Dylan. That was different. How? My tone wasn't cruel, just honest, exhausted. You walked out and asked me not to follow. You said you needed time to figure yourself out. I respected that, but I thought his voice faltered. I thought you'd still be here when I was ready. There it was. The truth he didn't mean to reveal. He hadn't expected consequences. He'd expected me to stay frozen in place, faithfully waiting on standby, while he wandered through whatever self-discovery journey he thought he was entitled to. I didn't laugh, though. The audacity brushed against something darkly funny in the back of my mind. "Dylan, you never said you were coming back." "I'm saying it now," he insisted. "Please meet me. Let's talk. Just please." His breath hitched desperate and uneven. "You owe me that much after 4 years. I don't owe you anything I didn't already give," I said quietly. "I gave you space. I gave you silence. I gave you every inch you asked for." He sucked in a sharp breath, like my words were physical. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Please, 5 minutes. I just need 5 minutes." He found his way to Nate's place the next morning. To this day, I'm convinced he got the address from a geotagged photo Nate posted of his homemade pancakes. Nate is enthusiastic about breakfast in a way that borders on reckless. I was carrying boxes out to my car when I saw Dylan jogging up the driveway. He was out of breath, wearing the same shirt from the photo, like he hadn't been home all night. "Isa," he gasped, stopping a few feet away, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed closer. 5 minutes. Nate stepped out onto the porch with a mug of coffee, eyebrows raised, in a, "You want me to call security or stand here awkwardly" sort of way. "It's okay," I said to him. "I've got this." Dylan nodded gratefully and gestured toward my car. "Can we talk inside?" I considered saying no. I considered telling him he could talk right here in the driveway in front of the world, but that felt like a punishment I didn't need to deliver. "Fine," I said. 5 minutes. We sat in the front seats. The air was heavy. He reached for my hand immediately, his palm cold and damp. And I let him mostly because I didn't have the energy to pull away yet. "I made a mistake, boy," he blurted. "The biggest mistake of my life." I was scared, confused. I ran from something real because I didn't know how to sit with it. "What changed?" I asked quietly. "Why now?" He looked away, jaw tightening. There was someone." The words landed like a stone hitting water ripples, reaching back 6 months. Her name was Lena, he continued. I met her at a work conference in February. We talked all night at the bar. I felt something I convinced myself meant we weren't right. So I asked for the break and started seeing her the next week. I pulled my hand away, this time slowly, deliberately. So you already had someone lined up when you asked for space? It wasn't like that, he insisted. It was exactly like that, I said calmly. I thought I had real feelings for her, he whispered, but it fizzled fast. She was wrong for me. Self-centered, immature, too obsessed with her CrossFit routine. I blinked. CrossFit? She talked about it nonstop. That sounds terrible, I deadpanned, unable to help myself. But Dylan, what does that have to do with us? Everything, he said, voice breaking. Because when it ended, when she dumped me, I realized what I'd thrown away. I've been going to therapy twice a week. I'm trying to fix what's broken in me. I'm ready now for everything we talked about. Marriage, kids, the house, the dog, all of it. I stared at him, really looked at the tears, the panic, the desperation, and beneath all of that, the expectation. He thought he could come back. He thought I'd been waiting. He thought my life was a paused movie he could unpause when he decided he was healed. That's good, I said gently. I hope therapy helps. Truly, but I'm not interested in being your consolation prize after your adventure didn't work out. You're not a consolation prize, he choked. You're the love of my life. Then you should have treated me like it 6 months ago, I said, instead of trading me in for a woman with protein powder in her purse. He flinched. Tears streamed down his face, full-bodied sobs, the kind that make your chest hurt to witness. A tiny part of me, a part built out of 4 years of loving him, felt sympathy, but a larger part felt nothing. Nothing but clarity. Is it serious with him? Dylan asked through the tears. The new guy, Connor. That's none of your business anymore, I said. But no, we're taking things slow. Then stay, he begged. Don't go to Seattle or take me with you. I'll move. I'll quit my job. I'll be whoever you need me to be. Dylan, I said softly. You hate rain. He froze. You hate cold. You hate gloom. You hate being far from your family. You don't want Seattle. You want a rewind button. He squeezed his eyes shut, shoulders collapsing. I opened the car door. Wait, Isa, please. I'm calling your sister, I said. She can pick you up. He grabbed my wrist, not hard, but desperately. Please don't leave. I already did, I said. You just didn't notice until now. I stepped out of the car. He slid out after me, falling to his knees on the driveway, sobbing into his hands. Nate appeared at the door again, eyes wide, silently mouth. Thing, are you okay? I nodded. Call his sister, I said, handing Nate my phone. As he dialed, Dylan's sobs echoed through the quiet suburban street, raw and unfiltered. I didn't tell him to stop. I didn't hold him. I didn't offer comfort. Some consequences belong entirely to the person who earned them. I finished loading the last box shut, the trunk, walked inside through the back door, and I didn't look back. Seattle didn't feel like an escape. It felt like air. Crisp, damp gray in a way that never settled heavy on my chest, only softened the edges of things. The first morning, I woke in my new apartment, half-unpacked boxes everywhere, a view of the water if I leaned at a precise angle. I stood at the window and watched the city breathe. It wasn't home yet, but it wasn't haunted either. Work came fast. The new role was demanding, but in a satisfying way. Real problems to solve, real decisions to make. My team actually respected boundaries. My boss told me to go home at 5 without it sounding like a trap. I started learning new coffee shops, new walking routes, new grocery store aisles. I got lost twice and didn't cry about it. Progress. Connor visited 3 weeks after I moved. He didn't make a big deal of it. Just texted me a screenshot of his booked flight and added, "Prepare yourself. I'm bringing my aggressively judgmental taste and snacks." When I picked him up at the airport, he hugged me quietly. The kind of embrace that wasn't about possession or apology, just recognition. We spent Saturday at Pike Place Market, joining tourists in watching a guy throw fish like he was auditioning for the Olympics. We wandered through stalls smelling of cinnamon and seabed, bought flowers we didn't need, and ate overpriced chowder out of paper cups. It was easy, comfortable, no pretending, no pressure. Sunday morning over coffee at my kitchen counter, he asked, "So how are you really?" No one had asked me that since the move, not without an agenda attached. I looked at the steam rising from my mug. "Better than I should be," I said. "Worse than I pretend." Somewhere in the middle, he nodded. Middle's honest. That was what I liked about him. He wasn't asking to be the solution. He just wanted to understand the problem. Dylan texted me twice after I left. The first message came the day after his sister picked him up from Nate's driveway. "I'm sorry about the scene. I wasn't myself. I'm working on it." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "I hope you're okay." Nothing more. Nothing less. The second message came a week later. A long text, apologies, acknowledgments, explanations. I didn't ask for, saying he understood why I left, that he didn't blame me, that he wanted me to be happy. I responded with, "Thank you. I wish you well too." That was the last time we spoke. 3 days later, he deleted all his social media. His sister DM'd Nate to say Dylan was focusing on therapy and work. Good. Genuinely, I didn't want him shattered. I didn't want him punished. I just didn't want him as my responsibility anymore. 3 months passed in Seattle. Connor and I talked most days, not always with words. Sometimes just a picture of the sky or a video of him trying to cook something that clearly fought back. We weren't defining anything, but we weren't avoiding it either. One morning, after a night spent watching a terrible movie we didn't pay attention to, he asked, "Are you over him?" "Dylan?" The question landed gently without accusation. I took a long breath. "I'm over the version of us I thought we were," I said. "That relationship doesn't exist anymore, and the person who kept it alive isn't me anymore either." He nodded, squeezed my hand. "Good," he said quietly. "Because I'm starting to really like the person you are now." I raised an eyebrow. "Just starting," he grinned. "Don't get cocky." A week later, over coffee and waffles that were slightly burnt, we made it official. No big speeches, no dramatic declarations, just, "Should we delete the apps?" "Yeah, I think we should." "Okay then, I guess this is us now." Us. The simplest label I'd ever said out loud. He accepted a job in Seattle starting in January. We began looking at 2-bedroom apartments with enough space for the dog we kept promising we'd adopt once we stopped procrastinating. For the first time in a long time, my future felt like something I was building, not something I was performing. The surprise came on a random Tuesday. I was scrolling through Instagram stories when I saw a familiar restaurant interior. Dim lights, wooden beams, romantic, without trying too hard. A soft focus photo showed a woman's hands with a ring. The caption read, "She said yes." Congrats, Dylan and Melissa. They hadn't tagged her, but I recognized the place, the ring style, even the dress. Not Lena, the conference woman. A different woman this time. Melissa Ward, according to the comments, a trainer from his gym. I stared at the photo, not in shock, not in pain, more like curiosity. I hoped he was sure this time. I hoped he'd do right by her. I hoped he wouldn't blow up her life the way he blew up mine when he got scared. Then I closed the app and went back to chopping vegetables for dinner. A month later, I flew back home for Nate's brother's wedding. During the reception, a mutual friend leaned across the table, voice low. "I saw Dylan a few weeks ago." "Oh." I kept my tone neutral. "He asked me something. The friend said wanted to know if you were happy." I blinked. "What did you say?" I told him yes. He paused, swirling the ice in his drink. He cried a little, then he smiled. Said that's what he wanted for you. I didn't know what to do with that, so I did nothing. Later, as Connor and I sat outside under string lights, watching tipsy relatives dance, he nudged me. "You okay?" I nodded truthfully. "Yeah, I am." He leaned his shoulder against mine. "Good, because I'm planning our dog's birthday party and I need you fully present." I laughed softly. "Already? We don't even have the dog yet." "Details," he said, waving a hand dismissively. On the flight back to Seattle, I stared out the window at the thin line of clouds glowing in the sunset and thought about a question someone at the wedding had asked me. Would you do anything differently if you could go back? My answer had come out without hesitation. No. Not because everything worked out perfectly, not because I didn't hurt, not because losing Dylan didn't break me first, but because I wouldn't want to be the person who begged someone to stay when they had already mentally left. That person loses twice. Once when they're abandoned, and again when they sacrifice their dignity trying to hold on to a ghost. You can't make someone choose you, and you shouldn't have to. When Dylan said he needed time, what he really meant, though, neither of us admitted it was that he wanted permission to explore other options without guilt. And when I said take all the time you need, I gave him that permission. I just didn't realize then that I was also giving myself permission to move on, to grow, to stop waiting for someone who wasn't waiting for me. Sometimes take all the time you need really means take forever, if that's what it comes to. I won't be here standing still when you come back, months later. On a random morning, while making oatmeal, the image of that night flashed through my mind. The photo Dylan sent of himself standing outside our old building, flowers in hand, blue shirt tears streaming. I used to replay that image, wondering what would have happened if I'd opened the door to him that night. If he'd found me in that apartment, if he'd asked for another chance sooner. But now, I know exactly how that movie ends. I've lived it already, and I don't need to watch it.